There aren't a ton of double action, single action guns on the market, and the Sig Sauer P229 Legion probably represents one of the better options on the market currently. And I'll show you that because I took it out against my LTT PX4, the CZ P09C Nocturne, and as a bonus, another aluminum frame gun that I'd been carrying a bunch recently, the Kimber KDS-9C. So I actually bought this gun at the beginning of the summer as a potential carry gun because I really like the original Sig Sauer P226 type things. I just love the geometry of the frame, just kind of the aesthetics. I think they look cool, and the triggers aren't bad. So I was like, you know what, I like my 226. It's a little long in the grip. Maybe I'll check this one out for carry. So I got this. I got the Romeo X Pro because it's got night sights that are pretty nice, but the night sights don't co-witness with anything other than the super low deck height of the Romeo X. And what I like specifically about the Legion series of the 226 229s is the way the controls are shaped. The traditional 226 229s, I end up riding the slide release so the gun doesn't lock open on the last round. While that's a super minor consideration, I can feel it when I'm shooting them as well. So just not having them, making contact with my palm is a plus as well. I just touched my eyeball and that was not comfortable. The other big feature it comes with out of the box is the SRT trigger system. So the double action on the gun is basically very good. It's one of the better double actions out of the box, where there's a little bit of stacking toward the rear if you pull it slow, but not a lot. It's generally very smooth, but where it's really, really nice is on that single action. It just has a very crisp trigger with a ridiculously short reset. But what I probably appreciate the most about the P226, P229 series is honestly the grip. Like, it just fits in my hand. It's got this kind of, for the P226 series, it's kind of exaggerated beaver tail, although it's kind of muted by other guns. But what it just does is it sits in the hand perfectly. The trigger guard is sort of relieved, so my knuckle fits right underneath it, super smooth, feels great. And then the grip is kind of wide, so it sits in my hand nicely. I have great access to the trigger. I would say it's probably one of the more manageable trigger reaches for, non-XL hand size people, but at the same time, double action, single action guns are not great for smaller handed people. But what I really enjoy about this is the fact that the texture goes all the way up to the bottom of the slide, and there's a little pronounced bump right there, so I'm really able to get behind the gun. The drumstick of my support hand really kind of catches this little sort of lump on the grip and helps me control the gun a lot, married with the really good texture on the grips that come from the factory on the gun. They're probably the upper end of aggressive of what you would like for carry. It's definitely a little bit abrasive, but it's not unmanageable. You can, do okay with it against your smooth, supple daddy tummy as you carry. Now, one thing with aluminum frame pistols is they dump more energy into your arms because the frame doesn't flex as much in recoil. So whatever energy is coming off that round in recoil is generally making it into your arms. But what I found with this gun, here, let me show you. Because the front rails go all the way to the end of the dust cover, I'm suspecting that you're losing some of that energy through friction on the sliding on the rails. It doesn't dump as much energy into the wrists as other aluminum frame guns, and notice that it does have just a single recoil spring, so it's not like it's some sort of recoil spring wizardry that's making the gun shoot consistently with range loads as well as kind of like hotter duty carry loads back together. And I found that to be true when I tested it with jacketed hollow points. I tested it with a few of them. I tested it with the Federal HST 124s, the Hornady Critical Duty 135 plus Ps, and Supervel 115 solid copper hollow points that are technically plus P, but they don't shoot like plus P. And what I noticed is that while the 135 kind of thumps a little bit harder in the hand, and the NATO ammo that I shot with it, there wasn't a big departure from the range loads either, the gun doesn't dump a lot of energy into the arm. So it's actually pretty gentle shooting to be what it is, which is quite nice. The accuracy from the gun is quite good. I only tested it with the Buffalo Creek 115s, and I was able to get kind of acceptable accuracy when I didn't have moments on the trigger, which unfortunately I did, but that's what happens. So shooting offhand at 25 yards, I got, decent production gun accuracy. I did better with hollow points off screen when I was zeroing the gun on other occasions. So for a premium gun, it is premium price. It's not like multiple four figures, but it is in kind of that lower four figure sort of bracket. It has all of the nice features that come on the P226 229 series of gun. So testing this against my other guns, I took it out with an LTT PX4 compact, the CZ P09C that I picked up recently for review, and the Kimber KDS-9C because it's an aluminum frame gun, roughly the same size, weighs roughly the same. Just wanted to see how it shot against it. So started evaluating it in kind of like rapid fire sort of recoil. What I found is that the P229 I felt really confident with, largely due to the grip geometry and grip texture. It's got the best grips of any of the guns that I shot, although the results weren't wildly different. Now that's worth kind of addressing right now at the beginning. I've been a competitive shooter for a dozen or so years, so I'm incredibly consistent. So my bad runs don't have a huge delta to my good runs. So what that means is that, you know, there's not going to be a wild difference between the guns. So ultimately, you're like, that's not a big difference, and you're right. Between all the guns that I shot, I found that the P229 Legion I'd probably rate second. I would say the PX4 was the softest shooting, largely due to the rotating barrel, but also it's only got a 3.1-inch barrel, so it's actually sending a lot of powder downrange. It's not fully, you know, combusting all of the powder to make it have more recoil. The P229, I'd say, was a close number 2. The Kimber KDS-9C was sort of a close number 3. It's very similar in how it shoots the regular range ammo to the P229, and the Sig P09C like very clearly was in a different league from the other guns on the table. The backstrap is just a lot narrower, so it kind of concentrates what energy is coming into your hand and kind of hits in the palm a little bit harder, and the trigger was, you know, kind of more difficult to manage. The trigger was, you know, several clicks down from what is on this gun and the other guns being shot. Next, I kind of shot it with some NATO loads to see how it differed from the Buffalo Creek 115s. Buffalo Creek 115s are super soft shooting out of pretty much every gun. They're a supporter of the channel, so if you want to check out that pinned comment, you can learn more about it there. But honestly, they make really nice shooting 115s. Jumping over to the white box NATO loads, I found that predictably the PX4 was still the softest shooting, although I was surprised, and I think it's largely due to the full-length rail at the front of the gun, that the P229 was not wildly different. The Kimber KDS-9C, and I mentioned this in the original video, is that you can really feel the difference between the different levels of ammunition, specifically on that gun, and it kind of made me scratch my head as to why the P229 didn't have that same sort of phenomenon, but I think it's probably due to those rails like we talked about. And at this point, I basically just put away the P09 because it very clearly was in a league of its own, not in the best way. So because I'm lazy and I was standing at the 25-yard line, I decided that, you know, the first drill was going to be controlled pairs on a 12-inch plate at 25 yards. Just seeing how I managed the trigger and what kind of accuracy I could connect with. The 229 went first. I went 6 for 8, which is okay, and the misses were very close to the plate. And the trigger speed I found to be in the low 0.5, so roughly a half a second shot to shot for an aim shot on a 12-inch plate at 25 yards. I found that the Beretta PX4 had sort of the same trigger speed. However, I ended up dropping, I think, 3 shots on the PX4, so that wasn't amazing, and I think that's largely due to the trigger shape. Part of the problem with doing this kind of like back-to-back-to-back evaluation on pistols is that you don't have time to get accustomed to sort of any of the guns. I guess the right way to do it would be to warm up on one gun and then shoot it entirely through the testing, and then do the same thing with the other gun so you get the best shake with it. But at the same time, that requires resetting cameras a whole bunch and takes a lot longer to film. The Kimber KDS-9C had a very similar trigger speed at kind of the mid 0.5, so very similar. And just the CZ, it was a lot longer for me to be able to shoot that thing. Managing the trigger, I was in the mid 0.6s, and that's just largely due to kind of the trigger shape, the trigger quality. It just was more difficult to manage the trigger on. I'm sure I could learn it if that's all I shot, but I don't, so I favor the models that I don't have a learning curve on the trigger. So at that point, I dropped the P09C from the equation and went up and did a couple bill drills at the 7-yard line. I don't practice my concealment draw really at all, and so my draw is good, not great, at about 1.5 seconds. But with the bill drills, doing a couple back-to-back runs, I found that I was doing about a 2.5 to 2.6 on the 229. I did have one moment on the trigger dropping a Charlie, but if you look at the hits, there is a very tight concentration there in the center of the target, which is what you want to see. Swapping over to the Beretta PX4, What I found with that is that the trigger shape is just a little bit more difficult to manage. The grip is not quite as contoured, and as a result, similarly dropping a C with basically the same times, is that the hits on the PX4 sort of opened up and had a lot more sort of vertical stringing. The Kimber KDS9C is right there in the zone as well. It did keep all its hits in the A zone, but I found that the grip profile is just a little bit of a different index relative to the 229 and the PX4, so it took me a little bit more time, so the Kimber paid a little bit of a penalty in the back-to-back shooting format. Finishing up, I did take it to the chrono with the 3 contender guns, chronoing a couple shots of the Federal HST that I had left over, and what I found is that the Kimber got the best velocity at about 1144 foot per second, pretty much right on the money with what the box says it should be. The P229 was about 30 foot per second slower, and the Beretta was about 30 foot per second slower than the P229.
1121.
You want the ammunition to be roughly the speed it says on the box, because that way you're getting the hollow point performance that you're supposed to get. While the P229 wasn't quite there, it was not quite 2% off, and similarly the Beretta was nearly 7% off. So while the Kimber clearly wins, the P229 was kind of close enough. Doing this video kind of gave me clarity, and I appreciate that. I wasn't even going to do the video, but you guys asked for it when I featured it in another video, so here you are. But in the kind of gun review space, you stack up a couple guns that you like and you start carrying them, and then your safe has a few of them, and you've got a couple holsters, and now you have a carry rotation and you didn't mean to. It matches with what I was expecting, because I suspected that I performed the best with the 229, and, you know, putting it to the test, I see that was true. Ultimately, the features that I really appreciate about the gun largely is the grip and the grip texture that come on the gun. Just the shape of the grip really does a great job. I personally like the shape of the trigger. It's very easy for me to manage. The trigger reach is easily manageable. It's not a super pronounced hook, but it is a little bit hooked, so you get a little nice leverage on it. The gun shoots really nice. I mean, honestly, the gun shoots wonderfully. I think it's a very gentle shooting gun, and it's cool looking. I kind of like the way the 226, 229 sort of looks. It's been reliable because I wasn't planning on doing a video. I haven't been keeping track of how many rounds I've shot it. I don't know, 5 or 6 times on the range now probably, and it's never really had an issue. Shot it with a bunch of different hollow points, as I talked about, and the gun's been nothing but reliable, and you know, it performs well and it looks cool. So I don't know what you're looking for in a carry gun, but I personally really like double action, single action, or single action only carry guns, because I like being able to hammer check as you holster or potentially have a safety on. So while the P229 is probably kind of slept on since it's kind of expensive, it's got an action type that a lot of people who've never shot hammer fired guns aren't going to want to just pick up. It's a super, you know, reliable, super accurate little gun, and it's, you know, generally pretty cool. So let me know what you guys want to know about it in the comments, and we'll take it there. I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.